and connecting communities tonight, and we're really lucky to have Rob Rees of Cultivating Community. So before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that this evening we meet on the lands of many different First Nations people. In my instance, it's the Dja Dja Wurrung people I'm in Hepburn, Victoria, of the Kulin Nation, and just want to acknowledge that their sovereignty was never ceded. And also, we do this every session. We'd like to invite all of the participants in the chat section just to jot down what traditional lands they meet on. And if you don't know at the moment, then find out so you'll know for next time. A quick intro, my name is Amy Padgett. I'm on the National Committee of AVSA. I'm originally from New South Wales, and at the moment I live at Melidora in Victoria. A note on AVSA, I'm sure many of you guys know that we are a farmer-led organisation and that we fight for the right for people to have culturally appropriate and nourishing food, grown and distributed in ethical and ecologically sound ways, and for our right to collectively determine our own food system. And we'll continue to fight, but we fight stronger if we have more members. So if you aren't a member of AVSA tonight, I encourage you to sign up to avsa.org.au. Yes, you can stand with us as we do all the things that we talk about. In terms of housekeeping, we are recording this session. And yes, at the moment, if everyone can switch off their videos and mics, and then at around 6:30 we should get to questions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to jump back on and we can chat then. So without any further ado, we have Rob Rees here of Cultivating Community. Rob, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then we can get chatting.
Yeah, good evening, and thank you for asking me to be here on behalf of Cultivating Community. It's a real pleasure, and it seems like a fantastic initiative that you've got going to get people connected in this way. So just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I'm originally from the UK. I've had over 20 odd years involved in the food systems world. Mostly at the far end of the chain, if you like, as a chef. So that's my deep background of Michelin star status. So I was top end hospitality industry, and then for many other reasons drifted into the world of social enterprise and running a number of hospitality businesses that employed people who were deaf, blind, and for whatever reason at risk. That won a number of awards, including sustainability awards. And then part of my midlife crisis is what I like to say, because of my devotion to my industry. In order to be able to reconnect with my family and take time, we moved to Australia 4.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And in that time, I set up my own social enterprise. But in December, an amazing opportunity came up that was advertised for the role of Chief Executive of Cultivating Community. And I took on that role on the 1st of March, roughly 10 days before the start of the pandemic. So I expect there's people on the call that know more about Cultivating Community than I do. And chances are you've met all the team, where I actually physically haven't met all the team because of the downside of the pandemic. So it's been a really interesting period of time to walk into an organization whose heartbeat is just amazing. In all my years of being involved in the sector, I've never met a workforce so devoted to the purpose of inspiring a healthy and just world. Our mission is to really support those that are from diverse and disadvantaged backgrounds, and to bring alive the joy that food has, and use that food to connect people again to each other, and the power of that connection again with the earth. It's been going 22 years. Mm-hmm. Its richness comes from its central locality. So we work mostly within the public housing areas of urban Melbourne. That specifically looks like 22 community gardens across the city, roughly 800 tenant gardeners, a mixture of different languages, different backgrounds, and demographics. and that contract is funded by the DHHS. In addition to that, we are in schools. We have 7 schools programs which connect everything around food and food sustainability with the power of education. And in addition to that, Peter runs out, who many of you will know, is actively busy across the whole of the food systems network, running community kitchens, community meal programs, upskilling and empowering individuals around food, and using, which I think is the priority for us, a place-based approach. So the ideas for anything come from the community themselves. It's an asset-based community development model, and it's exciting to know that 90% of every initiative has to be passed by the community in which we work with. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It's dead in the water straight away. So it's an amazing organisation. I'm very proud of it and to be part of it in this moment in time. And I'm happy to take questions about Cultivating Community, Amy, before we move on to some of the work we've been doing during the pandemic.
Sure. If anyone does have questions that they'd like me to ask, feel free to pop it in the chat. Rob, in terms of it being a community garden initiative and community garden sort of business, how do you differentiate between a cultivating community garden and sort of a stock standard, suburban community garden?
Yeah, that's I was thinking of that through myself. First of all, let's talk about what we can't do. So we can't do, for instance, we can't bring alive in some of these public spaces the depth and breadth of the therapeutic and occupational things that we know that community gardens can bring. So at Cultivated Community, we're actively looking for new spaces where we can not only take back control for us as an organisation, but give back control, if you like, to the people that use those spaces as well. So our job is, in terms of that contract, is keeping people safe, where what we really want to do is bring the stuff alive. So the difference really looks like you have a number of different products being grown that are deeply culturally appropriate. So we have everything from Timor, Somalian, Afghanistan, you name it, and I'm sure we can find a tenant garden that's from that country. And they're growing this amazing produce, whether it be for evoking memories, bringing back social connection, giving them just peace and quiet from being out of a tower block, maybe growing for medicine, and maybe a specific herb or a specific fruit or a specific vegetable, and of course again also growing specifically for their own culturally appropriate meals. So this diversity that's there and the celebration of that diversity, I think, is probably more unique than ever. The majority of the people that are in those spaces, for whatever reason, would be listed at risk, probably underemployed, and are doing as best they can with very little financial income. And it's amazing to see what they can achieve.
Brendan, whoever Brendan is, your mic is on. If you could please just mute it, that would be fantastic. Thanks, Rob. And I guess in terms of our topic tonight on empowering and connecting communities, how have you seen that through the gardens that you work with and the kitchens? What is it that's so special about food that you see as a way to empower and connect communities?
Yeah, it's difficult for me to answer that in terms of the duration that I've been in place, but the stories that I can see, it's similar to many aspects of what we know around food. So we know that food can bring fun, we know it can bring connection, we know it can bring memories. What I know that happens in the Fitzroy Food Hub, for instance, is you will, via that power of food, you can break down barriers, whether that be about ages, whether it be about religions, whether it be about all types of cultures. So over a plate of whatever it might be, you can have the discussion and debate, and it gives you an inroad. Not only does it give you an inroad, it then gives you the trust. And trust is really, really important if you're developing anything that's place-based. You have to have a real belief that whoever you're working with, whoever's in the group, whether it be a cooking program, a growing program, a high-rise baking program, whoever's there, you've got each other's backs, you've got that trust, and the food and the enjoyment and the sharing and the breaking of the bread, all of that brings it alive. Now, if that means that over that breaking of that bread or over a cooking club that we might be running, there's suddenly a conversation about actually what might be going on in their own personal life around, it could be violence or good things as well as negative things. If that conversation could then be had and opened up, just over the example of having a meal, then there's an opportunity for us to help solve those problems, you know, as together, just as friends would. That's the important thing, as friends would. We're not part of that system. We're a friendship that allows people to have that trust. Then there's a chance that they can go on and achieve new goals, new aspirations, and help solve whatever the problems they may be facing in their life. So we're an empowerment tool, if you like, and that's what we do.
Mm-hmm. And over the 22 years that Cultivating Community has been operating, has there been a point in history where, I know somebody mentioned in the chat who funds the school programs, and maybe just broadly, like in terms of say funding or financial support, has there been a point in the journey where it felt like there wasn't enough support to continue, or perhaps it wouldn't work, or you know, maybe gardens in blocks were passing phase? You know, was there ever a moment that it didn't look so bright?
I'm sure there has been, and there would be for any organisation, whether they be a traditional non-profit, social enterprise, or private company. In 22 years of an organisation, you have to innovate, you have to reinvent yourself, and you have to find ways to do your business differently. I suppose we are very grateful that we have a DHHS contract for those public housing spaces and those community gardens. But like many organisations, we need to also fight hard for our other incomes to be able to do our other projects. Now, that's not all other people's, the external organisation's problem. Some of that is what we have to do as an organisation. So we have to work better to measure our impact, to show the difference that we can make. For instance, we've just measured our last 3 years of projects against the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. That's one of the very first things that I brought in, is actually, well, let's look at the biggest systematic approach to measures that we can have. So I've overlapped with my team, you know, where are we? Where are our strengths in achieving the United Sustainable Development Goals? Where are our challenges? And how do we strengthen where our challenges are so we can do even better, so we can benchmark ourselves? So I think we have to find ways to do business differently. We're very excited about some of the opportunities that social enterprise can bring. We're an accredited social trader. So that can bring us opportunities for more other types of government contracts, bringing urban agriculture into office blocks, rooftops when the pandemic is over, as well as creating employment pathways such as the high-rise bakery, which up to now has been an amazing volunteer project once a month, where volunteers will come from the tower blocks. They'll make bread in our beautiful culturally appropriate bread in our wood-fired oven in the centre of our community garden. And that bread then goes to the community grocer, who will then distribute it or sell it to those that require it. So we're joined up, but that should be operating twice a week rather than once a month. And we should be looking to employ people from those towers, particularly at the moment where we're seeing that the growth is going to be in terms of female unemployment. We can create a model where people can come and work and the hours fit and suit them to manage families, to manage whatever it might be. We can give them confidence, trust, respect, and put empowerment back into their lives, and do the right thing at the same time. So we're excited. So we have to be able to wash our own face by doing better in the way we do business.
Mm-hmm. And that transferring from volunteer to sort of businesses, is that a track record that Cultivating Community has, or is that sort of the goals forward?
It's a new thing, I suppose, for Cultivating Community to take it to their next step. It's an experience that I've had previously in part of my work in social enterprises for nearly 20 years. So my role is to guide and make sure the team have the right skills and are enabled to be able to do that. I think it's an obvious step for the organisation, and you know, they're excited about the opportunities that can come. Moving Feast, which we'll talk about in a second, is providing real opportunities. But another example is, as a result of the pandemic, the team have produced something called living boxes, which are small individual wicking beds that can grow food for up to 3 months inside with very minimal light. And with a small grant, we were able to test this out with a small number of people. And we're now moving into stage 2, which says, well, can we employ someone to run the living box program from that first cohort, for instance, that's grown this produce, and turn it into a scale-upable business? Now, as a social enterprise, you don't have to make money. You can't lose money, but you don't have to make money. So it's an attitude and a mindset that comes with experience.
Mm-hmm. Super interesting. Well, let's touch on Moving Feast before we run out of time. So if you'd like to let perhaps most people on the call know what happened during lockdown. When was it? A couple of months ago in Melbourne.
Yes, we lose track, don't we? March, I think middle of March, we went into the lockdown. And Moving Feast, which some of you may have heard of and might have seen on social medias and various others, was a brainchild of Beck Scott from Street, who was quick on the phone and the email system to gather together a small group of like-minded food system organisations to work out rapidly. I'm trying to not use the pivot word, but I just did. Work out rapidly how we could respond to what we thought was going to be coming as a result of the pandemic. It quickly turned into probably 18 core social enterprise organisations working collaboratively, and it manifests itself physically into looking like, first of all, initially a food relief programme. So we're heavily entrenched in food relief at this present moment in time. But actually what's really important is what comes out of it next. What does the rejuvenation of the food system looks like, and how can the collaboration work together to improve that? But the food relief aspect has gone on to produce, as a collaboration of social enterprises, I think it's up to 100,000 culturally appropriate fresh meals, roughly 80,000 fresh food parcels that are all culturally appropriate. And importantly, from our point of view, Cultivating Community, we coordinated the grow aspect. So we quickly purchased 750,000 seeds, got them planted across 14 different sites now across Victoria. Up to yesterday, we've now harvested 600 kilograms of culturally appropriate food that's gone into those parcels. And today, a further 250,000 seeds have been purchased, and we're now having to re-sow again for the forthcoming season, as we can only see, sadly, the growth in the demand for those that need culture appropriate food relief. So it's been an amazing journey of collaboration, and again, one that's been driven by trust, respect. Chief executives sat around the table who are happy to be vulnerable about what's going well and what's not been going so well. Strong support from boards, good governance, and united by purpose-driven organisations.
Yeah, it's quite amazing to see what can be achieved when people, when like-minded people mobilise. Incredible.
I've started to try and reflect on why it's worked so well. Particularly, I keep saying, as a newcomer into the fold, if you like. So I was lucky to be invited in, and that's because of the strength of Cultivating Community's history. So it wasn't about me; it was about the organisation. And my reflections on it again are about the people around the table, or the organisations they're agile people anyway. So this kind of environment of change is probably something that they would thrive on. I know I do personally. Whilst it's hard work, it's demoralising at times, it's unbelievably challenging, and we're all facing those circumstances. There's something in my mindset and experience as a social entrepreneur that says, all right, let's get this shit done. Let's do it. And have I made mistakes as a social entrepreneur? Absolutely, I have. Will the Moving Feast network make mistakes? Probably. Probably we will. I can't think of any at the moment, but probably we will, and we'll learn by it, and we'll get back up again, and we'll do a better job for the people that we're there to serve as a result of it.
A question here. You mentioned systematics approach. How do you relate with the hospitality businesses? Can you create sustainable relationship with them and their customers? Is there a way to transfer the value of organic and community grown food to visitors through this other businesses, for instance?
Yeah, that's an interesting one from the hospitality industry. And I had a call a little bit earlier on today, which was asking similar questions around how do you get the industry to change and to adapt? How do you get the industry to realise that actually you've only got XYZ amount of oranges today because the season's short, or you're buying from a smaller supplier? And that's the same the world over. What I can say from my experiences, particularly in the UK, of running a number of hospitality businesses, is it comes from that trust. It comes from the respect. I went out there and worked the farms. I got to know Mrs. Cheese, Mr. Apple Juice, Mr. Fish, and Mrs. Beef. You know, I got to know them. I didn't just do the chef side of things and talk about how great local food was. I wanted to understand what drives the producer to be able to do what it is that they're doing. And actually, the again, mindsets, there's so many similarities between the mindset of a farmer and a producer and the mindset of a really passionate chef working flat out, doing the hours that they're doing, probably not making much money, busting the gut to try and educate the consumer about how good their produce is. And where there's that spark that works together, it works. So can it come from a main policy change? Probably not. Yeah. Probably not. I think it comes from the relationships and really developing those relationships with that micro local business and informing and empowering and bringing alive the education system for our consumers.
And in terms of the food that is grown in the community gardens, is that grown for home consumption, or is there like a commercial aspect to it?
No, that's one of the key differences. So we are unable to. It's not a market garden, so our tenants wouldn't be able to produce their stuff and sell. They're able to swap, so we love the idea of food swaps. But we absolutely, as an organisation, want to find ways to have this new space. And we're looking at a couple of partnerships at the moment with some new space where our team can potentially work with some of our tenant farmers in a different tenant gardeners in a different space, and wrap ourselves around, put our arm around them and say, it's okay, we're going to take you on this journey from this space here in this garden, knowing that their background might have been, for instance, a Kenyan farmer, and for whatever reason they found themselves in a tower block in Flemington. And actually, we should be, if he wants to, because this goes back to the play space side of things, if he wants to, we should be able to encourage him to be able to work in a bigger space. And eventually he comes and joins the farm with some of the people that are on this call, or Tammy, and eventually he's having his own enterprise that's all full of purpose and comes from that journey that he's learned on his pathway. So that would be wonderful for us.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the sort of urban, because cultivating community is very urban based, what is the sort of general landscape or the general sentiment on the city being able to grow to grow a sustainable amount of food for residents and maybe for these sort of enterprising opportunities?
Yeah, I don't think there's any excuse not to do it anymore. I should think everybody on this call knew how broken the food system was before the pandemic, and the pandemic has just shown us how dire it really is. So I don't think there's any excuse for any decision makers or enablers in our system to not find ways to make it happen, whether it be in a small box on a windowsill, right through to converted rooftops, whether it be the work of farm wall, whether it be huge spaces. We need to find a way that water can flow, food can grow, and it's all done in a way that is safe and affordable and full of goodness for everybody. So there's no excuse for it not to happen.
Mm-hmm. Tam's calling for Deb from Food Next Door to jump on. Deb, would you like to join us?
Sure, yeah. Hi Rob, hi Amy, hi
Hey, Deb.
Tammy, hi everyone else. I was just thinking when you wrote that, Tammy, that I was about to write, if you need any help from Food Next Door, give us a yell. Yeah, I know, Rob, that we've sort of vaguely connected and you'd be aware of the work that we do, which is exactly what you were just talking about. So helping people, in our case, from farming backgrounds to access land and have the support that they need to be able to farm on that land. And a lot of the farmers that we work with primarily do that to be able to grow foods that are familiar to them and to be able to share those in their community. But we're up here in Mildura looking really at developing it into part of our food system here, so that they're actually growing food for our broader community. So we have a model that's still being tweaked, but getting closer to something that's working. And yeah, very happy to share any of our learnings and templates and agreements and so on that we've developed.
That'd be amazing. That'd be amazing. Thank you very much. And it just seems, again, when we sit around the table of the collaboration of Moving Feast, the glue that drives us all together is this desire to create employment pathways for those that we're there to help. And it just seems an obvious journey for me coming in to look at all the different things that Cultivating Community does. So yeah, we'll connect again. We'll make this happen. All these things take time, and I think for anybody on the call, particularly on a week like this, is don't give up hope. You know, particularly if you've got your purposes clear. Yeah, and your plan might go on a slightly different journey. There's the realism and there's the idealism, but you'll eventually get there in the end. And it's really important to say, just don't give up. So we could be 2 years away, Deb. We could be 2 weeks away. Who knows? But the goal's the same. And I think from collaboration, there may have been times in the past where organisations have got really similar drivers for what they're trying to do. But what the Moving Feast Network has done is actually made people understand the context, understand the skills and who brings to what, and unite behind the purpose and not see it as a threat. It's absolutely a strength, and the more we can unite behind it, the stronger the enablers will come to the table and make things happen for us.
Well said, Rob. Is there, I'd be happy to throw the line over to anyone else who'd like to jump on the call and chat. There might be people from all over Australia, or, you know, working in individual community groups that would like some sort of advice or questions or any challenges that you're facing. So yeah, feel free to join in on the discussion. Thanks, Deb, too. And Rob, have you heard of Farmer Incubator and your thoughts on working with them?
I haven't. Tell me about them. And I'll work with anybody. I'm open-minded to anything. So I'd love to know more about them.
Tam, do you want to jump on and share what we know about Farmer Incubator? Beautiful.
Sure. Yeah. So Farmer Incubator was started by Paul Miriotta a number of years ago, and his goal is to provide pathways to get the people who want to farm onto land. And he has these pop-up garlic. Well, it's a bigger organization now. They have pop-up garlic farming where they teach people for 9 months, and they teach them the growing and the marketing and the sales and everything. But what I was thinking about when you were talking before is that Farmer Incubator would actually benefit from some of the farmers who are in the towers that Cultivating Community works with. There could be both the access to land potential with them, but the opportunity for them to use those deep skills that they bring from their countries and mentor these young farmers in Australia in farming. So I think it would be a really nice connection, Rob, that could be fruitful.
Yeah, that's a brilliant link. The skills and knowledge of whether they be farmers or not, but the gardeners in our public housing space, is immense. It's fascinating to hear and just see the diversity in the ways in which they grow and produce things. So yeah, that'd be a wonderful way of being able to share again the knowledge and the connection and to collaborate. As I say, I had literally 10 days before we went into lockdown, and was lucky enough to go to a couple of the gardens. And as a chef, you get to see, as a chef that was lucky enough to travel the world representing the country. And I think I met yourself and Miranda, who's on this call, a long while ago before I moved here, because I was on a trade mission. But as a chef, you think you've seen most things around the world in terms of food, because wherever you go, you take the dark streets and you have the cafe out the back and whatever it might be. But just in those 2 or 3 garden visits, the things that people brought to me to smell, to rip open, to taste, I just hadn't seen before. And the knowledge is just fantastic, absolutely. Now, some of these items might not be the top end providore type marketplace, but they're meaningful, rich foods that, if you look at something like the food relief model of the moment where we've been involved, these individuals don't want the traditional food bank model. They don't want Tim Tams and dried products. They really are happy with just some pak choys, a couple of chilies and some olive oil. And that's the demand, that's the culture that they have. That's what they want to eat. And so, we should celebrate that as much as we possibly can, with as much diversity in our growing systems as we possibly can. So yeah, I'd love to share that knowledge. Just do it, Tammy.
I'll do an introduction for you. I think that would be really, a lot could come of it.
Thank you.
Very cool. We have a question here from Alicia. She's thanking you for your insights and is curious about the skills needed for effectively starting a community garden on a very small scale. What kind of expertise is essential for keeping a garden running and producing food? E.g., would you need a dedicated person with experience in growing food?
That's a really good question that I'm not even going to spout an answer that I don't know to. So what I do know is I've got people in the team who are experts and can guide you on doing that. So do email info@cultivatingcommunity.org.au. We'll pick that up tomorrow, and I'll be able to give you all the right advice on starting a community garden. The biggest challenge that I can see from my short time, is making sure, first of all, you've got the right governance structure. So making sure, because it is all about a shared space, and making sure that you are empowering the people that you're setting that garden up for is really, really fundamental. Of course, you'll also have all those legalities around planning and water and access and the things that you could do with the space, but that governance structure is really fundamental. And we had 22 years of trying to work out the right governance structure. Thirdly, the next thing is keeping people safe. So if you're going to run it, you do need to make sure it's a safe space. And we're talking in terms of not just the soil testing and the quality of the soil, but everything from the nuts, the bolts, the fences, the gates, the flooring and things like that. In this modern world, it's really also fundamental to make that space as accessible as you possibly can. And I know for us at Cultivating Community, that becomes a challenge. So yes, we want to have the right access for wheelchair users, rise and fall beds, etc., and getting the right sort of beds that are accessible for everybody. But again, if you're working around a culturally appropriate and place-based model, what we know is that the majority of our current tenant gardeners are uncomfortable with the traditional, what we would see as a Western design disability garden, because actually for them, they still want to get in on their knees and into the beds and digging and pulling things up. So the idea of raised beds is not something that sits comfortably, although that fits perfectly for someone that's in a wheelchair. So really think deep about that disability access, that inclusiveness for your garden space, the governance structure, and of course the planning permissions. But do email us.
Very kind, thank you. That's interesting. The governance echoes the conversation that we had when we were chatting about co-ops and building co-ops, and that idea of, in this instance, if the idea is a community garden, it's like you can't run away with that that idea of what we're going to grow and where and what's it going to look like. It's like it has to be square, like, yeah, first step first. How are we making decisions? What are our values? How do we talk to each other? What's our resolution process?
Yeah, it all, yeah, that's the word community. Now, for some individuals, you can find that really challenging, but the whole joy of asset-based community development is you will go in with your set of ideas and you'll come out with only one of them actually coming in, but you'll have 9 different ones. You have to manage it in a way that obviously doesn't always deliver on those expectations, because you can't promise everything, but it helps, it reshapes stuff. That's what co-design is all about. It reshapes stuff, it tests your assumptions and makes sure that you've got something that's going to be longer lasting as a result from that process. So go slower to begin with for the long-term benefit.
Mm-hmm. There's a question here from Elizabeth Collins about water rights in regional Vic. I'm not sure you're going to know the answer to that, but if there's anyone online that knows that answer, please jump in.
I don't know the answer to that.
and then Deb from Food Next Door also wants to link you up with someone else. We usually ask this question in these webinar series. What's the biggest challenge you see in your space? And yeah, feel free to welcome it to answer that in terms of CC or Moving Feast, in terms of, yeah, what do you think is the biggest challenge in this space of equalising food access, or, you know, working together?
Yeah, I'll try and do both answers then. From a cultivating community point of view, the pandemic is challenging. Like all of us, the stops and starts to our business are a real challenge. We really want to be able to get physically connecting again with our tenant gardeners. So we haven't got that connection. They're not accessing these. We've got 800 gardeners that can't get to their space. So our big challenge there is proving the human right access that those individuals should have to those gardens. Our job is well, it's not our job, but we want to stand up for the rights of our gardeners so they can have the access to their spaces, which they love, which they nurture, where they grow food. So I think we will have a battle on our hands to get that sorted over the next 4 weeks and get them in there as soon as we possibly can. We also have a huge challenge around raising that profile again, that passion that I had earlier on around our enablers. So my enablers for me is the code for the politicians, and I try not to be drawn on the political debate and side of things, but I think the opportunities, sadly, that a pandemic can bring for change, to reset and rethink the system, will be lost if we don't convince the enablers not to default back to the usual way of doing business. So we have to find a way as a system to collectively, statesmanlike, professionally, knock on that door really hard, and continue to knock on the door really hard to make sure the right change happens. So I think that's a big challenge for us. For Moving Feast, similarly, as a collective, there's that knocking on the door that's important. But I think the challenges are keeping us all so damn excited about the momentum that it brings. That's the thing. We are all driven by it. For many of us, it's the lifesaver for our sanity to be able to have this collective way of doing business. It really is, certainly from my point of view. So we have to be able to learn to manage that. The momentum of that pivot will have ups and downs, and that's down to our leadership and how we manage that as leaders, and how we then portray that back to our organizations will also be a challenge.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And some of the bright spots that you've seen through the pandemic?
It's endless. It's endless. Look, she's on the call. Miranda's on the call. I can see her name on the bottom of my screen. I'll just take this morning. It's a text that comes from Miranda that says, "I've got some spare veg. Can you deal with it?" I can then text my member of the team, "I've got some spare veg. Can you deal with it?" Yes. Okay, who's going to bring it? I text another member of my team, Kaz, can you bring this? Yeah, I'll go and pick it up. Within 40 minutes, we've solved the problem. It's that problem solving. It's that get shit done stuff again. It's being able to be agile. And that's been endless. The joy that I know it's brought to individuals in food relief systems where they've got this bag of fresh, culturally appropriate food, amazing to see. Just being, you know, if you take that horrid weekend that the towers were locked down here in Melbourne, and the speed from the announcement of 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 5 o'clock, myself, Russ from Community Grocer, and a couple of others were already having dialogue with MPs and officials to say, you've got to do this better. And by the Sunday morning, we started to see change happen. So that power, that speed, that momentum, that's brought change has been amazing to see. And we know thousands of people have benefited as a result of Moving Feast. Hundreds of organisations, all the suppliers that feed into Miranda's farmers markets and elsewhere, there's been able to benefit. You might not have seen it, but the beneficiaries are unbelievably grateful.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Honestly, it was such a big story. And, you know, for those that didn't have any personal connections into those towers or people working with that, it was just a sort of, you know, another headline and another, you know, outrage on social media. So it's really wonderful to hear that there were positive stories and things being done there. Anyone else? Is there anyone else that would like to ask Rob a question? Everyone seems to be a bit quiet tonight. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Rob? I guess we chatted about how important baseline sort of, you know, talking or at least speaking to the enablers in the language they use. So the importance of data and you know, assembling reports and sort of is there anything that you can talk to that? Yeah,
it's a I think it's a challenge for many organisations is how do we report our impact, the difference that we're making. As I said earlier, I referenced the Sustainable Development Goals simply because I think that they're likely to be refreshed in a couple of weeks' time as we enter Sustainable Development Week and a result of the pandemic. But it seems to be a really strong, systematic measurement tool or that's been used across the globe that we know governments have had to sign up to. So to be able to show that if you're achieving that, you're adding value to what actually is the government agenda, may help with terms of the enablement. Again, from a cultivating community point of view, I've often heard there are barriers because we have languages and it takes time and it's more qualitative data rather than quantitative data. That's important, but we can still find ways to develop measurements around social connection and overcoming isolation and moving away, if you like, more from the obvious measurements, if we take food around obesity and malnutrition, for instance, and the double burden, but actually moving to a more system-wide approach that can really show how we're having that impact on the social, the economical, and the environmental side of things at the same time. And the importance that the food system has in that has been undervalued for so long. And so we need to be able to prove it so that people invest in us.
Wonderful. Okay, a few questions here. So someone's asking, I'm going to say that wrong, Eagle Rise Farm, any comments about meat distribution or meat production and distribution? Does that sort of come into the...
No, we've been vegetarian in terms of the Moving Feast network, and did that deliberately, I suppose, in terms of what was quick in terms of risk management side of things, plus also actually knowing the marketplace in which cultivating community works and special culture appropriateness and dietary requirements. But that's not to say, if we go back to that conversation we had earlier around farming and the journey of farming, I'd like to think that we wouldn't just be talking about fruit and vegetable production. We'd be trying to find ways in which we can develop that pathway into the meat industry as well. Yeah, so that's where I'd like to see it.
Yes, and I mean, there's a handful of things that you have to manage in terms of what's appropriate and what is safe, and yeah, I guess meat does add that next complexity. Any specific policy asked for state and federal governments? How can all the changes we want to see from Louise Dales?
Oh, we haven't got all day. Look, I would love to see a policy that clearly states. I'd love to see us move to an element that makes a human right to food a legal requirement here in Australia, because I don't believe it is a legal requirement. So I'd like to see that those rights develop there. I would love to see policies that strengthen the opportunity for more urban agricultural elements to take place. And I think those be my top two that I am more knowledgeable in at this present moment in time, based on my background here in Australia. In the UK, and something that I would love to see here. So I led the transformation of the school food system post Jamie Oliver for the Blair government. So I was responsible for roughly 10 million school meals every day in England, and the transformation from what was roughly pretty poor food to something. It still wasn't perfect, but certainly a better model. I definitely think there should be new policies here in Victoria around our canteens that are based on a public health model. I would love to see, particularly in areas of real risk, where as what we've seen as a result of the pandemic, I think we'd improve that canteen model with a really good fresh food supply into that canteen model. We could really see more people employed from the community that it's for, working in that canteen model, supplying good, wholesome, fresh lunches, subsidised and funded by the government, as a way in order, as an essential to be able to feed children a really guaranteed good meal once a day that's going to make them healthy, wealthy, wise, and put the economy back on track. So that would be a huge major policy ask for me. When
you say that, and I guess the question is asking this as well, when there's a policy, top down sort of solution, let's say, and we have, a better model, a better, sorry, just got a call on my phone. If we have a better model, then we're kind of centralizing the solution, and we're sort of not able to encourage communities to sort of sort the problem out themselves, or at least reconnect with, say, local suppliers themselves. If we sort of say, right, ABC, your lunch should look like this, and here's a list of accredited suppliers that you can choose to buy them from. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of, it
doesn't have to be like that.
Right.
I do hear what you mean, and there's many failed systems that are like that, and it becomes about consumerism and rather about humans. Where you have the advantage here in Australia is you'll be building it from scratch, because the current model isn't fit for purpose in many places. There's some great examples, but it's not fit for purpose in many places as canteen models. So you can define what that looks like on a very localized level if that's what you want to do. The other essential point, so why is it centralized in many other countries? Well, because it's about profit. It's about profit and it's about scale of economy. If your model that you set up for a canteen purpose right at the very beginning isn't about that, but it's a social enterprise model, and it's about creating employment with a really good product, because that's the other thing around social enterprise. You can't survive if you're selling rubbish. You've still got to have a really good product and a really strong purpose. So if you define your model for a canteen to be a really purpose-driven social enterprise, you can have both. You can create something really, really special really, really localized and individualized, really focused around improving the public health of who it is that you're feeding and in creating employment. So you're joining up all the dots.
Yes.
Joining up all the dots is so important if we want something to flourish and thrive.
Mm.
That's my view.
But I mean, I guess in order for those things to kind of move beyond where they are at the moment, you really do need those engaged stakeholders. You know, you need, I mean, in the case of canteens, let's say, or, you know, I guess you could speak about it from any point of view, really, but it's like, yeah, people who care and people who aren't happy with the status quo.
Yeah, you have to show people what's in it for them. And I had actually with some of the producers back in the UK, for instance, and when we talked last week, Amy, I remember doing a report that looked at 2 large hospitals in my part of the world where I was working, Gloucestershire. So these 2 major hospitals were each buying multi-million dollars worth of coleslaw and multi-million dollars worth of pre-packed grated cheese to put in all of the sandwiches, the lasagnas, whatever it might be. At that time, none of them had ever had a conversation with the cheese collaborators or the carrot man, cabbage woman, mayonnaise maker, and you know, for the slaws. And actually, when we went out there and we offered the marketplace, we said, look, we've broken it down. Here are the opportunities that are there for you if you want to do it. Now, many of them decided no, they didn't want to do it, and that's fine. But they'd never been asked a question for whether or not they wanted the business. So I think you could do it on a really small scale around, if you just take the public housing, the number of schools in the public housing spaces, where we know people are at risk for a huge amount of reasons. There has to be a way that we can, through policy and through good collaboration, communication, be able to show the marketplace that says, if you run this for yourselves as a community, you could have an amazing canteen model here. You really could. So I think it could be done. But again, it's one of those that it takes time. It takes time, and you share the vision, and you've got to have that vision. But if you're the person that's sharing the vision, you've got to also expect that it's going to change a little bit on the way, because that's what involving people is all about. And you have to be strong and be able to take that, because as a result, you'll end up with a better model at the end of it. Which
comes back nicely to the point, or to the topic really, of community, really, and that, you know, we're better together, and that it can't just be one person's vision and one person's dream, because yeah, that's just anti-community.
We're absolutely better together, for the good days, for the bad days. And it's about how we constructively make our points and challenge our friends and our families, and things like, your best friend is the one that will tell you, you don't look good in that dress. Right? And that's the same for the way in which we collaborate. But we have to be prepared to understand what our context is that we bring to the collaborations and to the vision. And that may mean we have to give things up for the long-term gain. And we might end up going into new paths and new ways of doing things. But ultimately, we're all adding value to each other's knowledge, experience, and purpose day after day.
Beautiful, Rob. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us this evening. We've still got a few more minutes. If anyone actually wants to turn their camera on and turn their mic on, please do. No one wants to join in. This has been such an interesting chat. I've certainly learned a lot.
I have to say, I'm the same when I'm on one of these, not this one, but when I do Zooms, I go very quiet. It's always at this time of night. I bet a number of people have got a glass of wine, a local gin. It's fine.
Too funny. All right. Someone's written, someone wants to know what is a good place to start in terms of sourcing land and community spaces available to lease or other.
Yeah, from my point of view and understanding of it, the best place is go to your local council, try and find, from the urban point of view, try and find if they have an urban agricultural strategy, go talk to them and find the right contact, and that's your best starting space. I think as more LGAs commit to individual food policies, you'll be able to find different contacts within the variety of councils. I know a number of new groups have been set up post the pandemic. So yeah, ring them up, find a name, go get them.
Wonderful, thanks so much. That was from Karen, and sorry, Karen, I didn't see your question before. Another question from Eagle Rice Farm. I figured out how to say it. Do you feel that this system could be expanded from the garden model to multi-enterprise community farms?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, it can. Again, it'll be around context, and it's around celebrating. Each of those community farms needs to probably have its own, if you like, centre of excellence, so that we're not stepping on everybody's toes. There's a number of things that everyone will be doing, but then there may be one or two things that will be specific to that particular group, and then those things will all join up as those dots, like I say. So yeah, absolutely.
Great. You seem to be very knowledgeable, Rob, on social enterprises. I mean, that's proving your background. But yeah, I wonder if some of our members might be interested in social enterprises to ask specific sort of questions. But yeah, if our members would be interested, would you be open to sort of fielding very specific questions about that sort of thing?
Yep, I'll do my best. My best advice, if you're thinking about it in terms of social enterprise, is don't get on social enterprise. Don't get hooked up straight away on your governance structure. Actually, just get get hooked up on your purpose. And many of you will probably are operating as social enterprise anyway. The key, I suppose, if the best advice in terms of financial opportunities from social enterprise is if you can get your DGR status here. It's different in terms of the UK, but if you can get your DGR status as well as being a social enterprise, that gives you the opportunity to be able to access some of those wider community grants and development models, as well as being able to wash your own face. If you haven't got it, it becomes harder, but you can still find ways to be able to do the best business you possibly can. So it's around about your ethics, it's around about your purpose. Don't get hooked up on your governance.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So we're right on 7 now. So yes, I'm sure people have things to do. There is a question from Louise Sales asking if you could share a little bit more on the school dinner program. I don't know if you have time, if you'd like to sort of give us a little spiel.
Where do you want to start? School dinners and how we did the transformation in the UK was the key trick from our point of view at the School Food Trust and Children's Food Trust was empowering the cooks and the dinner ladies that were working the meals. I mean, it's a different meal system to here, but I think it's a meal system you could bring here. So that was the empowerment came from empowering the workforce, forgetting the managers and the leaders and the large organisations. How could we get the troops doing the day-to-day job empowered to be doing the right thing? And then the other big thing, which I think is relevant for Victoria, we had a policy that came in that made infant free school meals. So everyone in year 1, year 2 and year 3 was entitled to a free school meal. And we had less than 12 months to implement that policy. And that basically brought an extra 1 million meals every day into the English school meal system. So that's roughly the same amount of children at any one time in Victoria that would be at school. And we implemented that policy in just under the 12 months. And less than 1% of the schools didn't have it in place. So if the enablers wanted to make it happen, it can happen.
Wow. Very, yeah. Food for thought.
Indeed.
All right. Anyone? Yes, thank you so much for your time, Ron. We've really appreciated having you on the line. Feel free to turn your cameras on if everyone wants to give a wave and a goodbye. But yes, stay tuned for ABSA's next session, Tam.
Nina's next. I'll let you do that. I was going to thank Rob on behalf of ABSA for joining us tonight and sharing those insights. And I mean, you spoke the language of food sovereignty and culturally appropriate food, and you spoke spoke to degrowth ideas and sufficiency for all. I think the idea of social enterprises should just be what enterprises look like. That, it doesn't need to make more money than what's required to pay all the wages. That's really sufficient for all. So, yeah, it was really was really great to listen, Rob, and hear what Cultivating Community are doing, what Moving Feast is doing. Great to have Miranda here as well. And also Deb to be able to talk to what's been happening with Food Next Door. So yeah, this was a great session. I appreciate you being here. I'll let Amy do the wrap up though. And thank you to all of you for coming as well and participating. I think we're, hopefully the series is showing people what's possible and what a totally different future is possible, because the people involved in these sessions are not the future, they are the present. It's happening.
Fantastic. And yes, so it is the next one that we're chatting to is on the 23rd of September, so in 2 weeks' time, which is actually Southern Harvest, Tam. So we're chatting.
Oh, sorry, Southern Harvest, and then the New Economies Network Australia.
So yes, we look forward to speaking to our comrades in Canberra in 2 weeks' time. Please do join us.
And in answer to the discussions being made available, AFSA now has a YouTube channel. So all of these recordings are uploaded to the AFSA YouTube channel and they're viewable in perpetuity, I suppose.
Amazing. Well, thanks again, Rob. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Amy, for hosting. Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
Take care.